I'm Robin Lundberg, joined by Sports Illustrated's executive editor, Jon Wertheim. Now, Jon, you broke a story on the Dallas Mavericks, specifically what you describe as a corporate culture rife with misogyny and predatory sexual behavior, with former CEO and president Terdema Ussery, the offender-in-chief. One former employee called it a real-life animal house. Can you paint us a picture of exactly what was going on there?
Yeah, this was a product of a lengthy investigation I undertook with Jessica Luther, who's based in Texas, a great investigative reporter, and we'd gotten a tip and pursued it. It was just, Robin, it's just one of these stories where every call led to another, and the anecdotes and the corroboration and the stories we were told, the patterns, it really did paint a picture. I think you quoted the Animal House line. There were a number of other metaphors. These were mostly former employees, but some current ones as well, mostly female, but some male as well, and all this, I think, fits into this Me Too prism. I mean, I don't know if this story comes about if this were a year ago, but in this climate, I think people felt emboldened to speak, and the pattern was pretty clear.
Now, you were told the problems extended all the way to HR. What exactly happened when some of these incidents were reported?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it did seem like one individual who was a real culprit was the CEO. So this went all the way to the top of the organization, and it also seemed as though HR was problematic, that there was an HR official that a lot of the women didn't feel like they could go to him and talk formally because they had experiences that suggested he might not be taking them seriously.
Now, Ussery was incredibly widely respected in the basketball world. His name was even floated as a possible future NBA commissioner. Does that make you worried or concerned as to how pervasive these type of issues may be across the sports world?
Yeah, I don't know who knew what, but as you say, I mean, this is a figure who was in his early 30s and commissioner of the CBA. He had a very high-ranking job at Nike. He was the Mavericks CEO for, since the late 90s. This is someone that David Stern called a protege at one point. I don't know who knew what, but it did seem like there was a pattern here. This wasn't an isolated incident.
Of course, when people think about the Mavericks, they're going to think about Mark Cuban. No one you interviewed for this story said that Mark Cuban was involved or complicit. However, multiple people said they didn't believe that he was unaware, with one saying, of course Mark knew. Cuban told you he was blindsided by your reporting. Do you believe him?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an obvious direction the story is going to go. This is a very prominent owner. This is a guy who prides himself on hands-on approaches and on micromanaging. What did Mark Cuban know? I've spoken with Mark a few times since we went to them with a chance to comment. And Mark, as you say, claims to have no knowledge, blindsided. He's been very outspoken. He's embarrassed. He's ashamed. There's been very civil conversations. He's already addressed the employees of the team. And, I think that's a valid question. I think it's a reasonable question to wonder what this owner, especially of all owners, what he did or didn't know. Mark makes a distinction that, look, I'm a basketball guy. You ask me anyone's salary, I know it. You ask me about the basketball analytics, I know it. The business side is something totally separate. I don't even have an office there. These are questions that Mark will have to reckon with. But again, he's been very upfront and got right back to me, and we've had some email exchanges. He's clearly upset by this, and we'll see where this goes from here.
Now, it was systemic, you're implying in the reporting. They had someone working for Mavs.com who was arrested for assaulting a female, and then later also was in trouble for allegedly hitting a coworker who he was dating. So with all that going on under his purview, how much culpability do you think Cuban should have? Yeah,
again, I think he draws a distinction between the basketball side and the business side. I mean, he's already in the last 24 hours been very proactive. I think these are questions that are going to be continued to be asked of him. Honestly, not a good look for an owner who prides himself. I mean, one of his great calling cards is how much he cares, how passionate he is, how hands-on he is. It's a lot he's got to answer for.
To be fair, he did tell you there's a problem in the Mavericks organization. We've got to fix it. That's it. We're going to take every step. It's not something we tolerate. I'm embarrassed, to be honest with you, that it happened under my ownership, and it needs to be fixed, period. End of story. So do you think he's handling it all the right way now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the genesis of this story came from some reporting on the Panthers and Jerry Richardson. I never spoke to Jerry Richardson. Jerry Richardson, I don't believe, has made a public statement since the allegations came out. I mean, obviously, Mark isn't the subject of the allegations per se, but still, this is the organization that he runs. The buck stops here. And Mark, in the last 24 hours alone, has been very outspoken. And again, it's some action to go with the words as well.
Speaking of the Jerry Richardson story, you broke that a couple months ago. How does this story compare?
It's different in the sense that this was the owner committing bad acts in Carolina. In this case, in Dallas, Mark Cuban. Let's be clear. A lot of people wonder, Mark had to have known, but the acts themselves are not attributed to Mark Cuban. Again, the response has been very different. The Panthers were not particularly forthcoming, and within an hour of sending Mark Cuban some questions and assertions, we're spending some time on the phone and have had multiple communications since. Again, these are patterns, these are cultures. One thing I took away from both stories is that this has the effect of chasing women out of the sports industry. And in both situations, both in Charlotte and in Dallas, there are women who worked in sports and got out of the industry because they did not feel respected, they did not feel safe. And I think that's one takeaway from this story, that they're bad actors and that there are Me Too allegations. But one of the effects of this is that in an industry that's already disproportionately male, cultures like this have the impact of driving away women, and that's a problem.
When you talk about the sports culture, I think it's worth noting the term locker room culture was used to describe the environment in Dallas, yet no players were implicated. In fact, you made it clear that the locker room itself was an actual refuge from all of this. So how much do you think is corporate culture and how much do you think is the sports culture?
That's an irony. We hear this term locker room culture, and yet we had women say, I go to the locker room and Dirk Nowitzki, great guy. Vince Carter, great. Coach Carlisle, nothing but respectful. They'd go to the office, and that's where the locker room culture would kick in. So, this is one of the rare sports stories where the athletes themselves have nothing to do with some of the allegations being lodged. Let's be clear about that. But, these are predominantly male workforces and workplaces, and it's the sports industry. And again, some of the behavior, this is not one guy, this is not one bad apple. This is a story about a culture.
Jon Wertheim, we appreciate your incredible reporting on this.
Thanks, Robin.